Cindy, you ready to go?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, okay. All right. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks. Welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. Very excited to have as my guest today, Cindy Benezra. Cindy, welcome.
Thank you. It's so great to be here.
So Cindy was born in Arizona into a Mexican and German family with strong values and traditions. Despite what looked like an upstanding family, she faced physical, sexual, and emotional abuse inside her home. As an American living abroad for most of her upbringing, she found hope and healing through travel, friendship, and inner strength. In Cindy's memoir, Under the Orange Blossoms, she shares her story of finding hope in the darkest times in life. Cindy, welcome.
Great to be here.
So, look, let's just dive in here. First of all, thank you for coming on here, for taking the time to do this. I realize this is not easy, however you slice it, but thank you for being here.
Well, you know what? We need to talk about this. I think there's such a taboo stigma around sexual assault or sexual abuse, and people find it uncomfortable, and it just needs to be discussed. I think it'll create more awareness if we just keep on talking about it.
Right. All right. So where do you want to start?
Well, I basically wrote the book that I was looking for as a child. I was physically and sexually abused from 5 to 10. And then later on, I also gave birth to a son who was born with a rare brain tumor. And that also created a lot of trauma, more of a grieving process in my life. And so it just felt like it was just like it was a continuum, it was just going on and on. And I know life is not perfect and we all have our challenges, but I feel like I've had quite a bit in my life. I know it's random, but so I wrote a book that I was searching for when I was in my teenage years, because in my teenage years, I was so devastated. I lived in a foreign country. I lived in Spain. And I couldn't find any resources or who to turn to. Didn't speak the language. We didn't have the internet then. I was incredibly depressed. I didn't even know what depression was.
Mm-hmm.
So times have changed. I think we talk a lot more about depression, mental health illnesses, but at that time it really was just something that just was not talked about. I mean, even a divorce was even taboo then.
Right.
Finding out, yeah.
So you said between the ages of 5 and 10, where were you, in the States or abroad at this time?
I was in the States, in Arizona. And then from there, my dad moved. He's a petroleum engineer. He moved to places like Saudi Arabia and Iran. So I didn't live with him growing up after that. So he would come back and visit. And my mom is Mexican, so she wanted to speak her native tongue. So she decided to go to Spain because it was closer to go back and forth from Iran than it would be to go to the States.
And at what point, Cindy, did you realize that something had been going on?
So my trigger for me was I was becoming sexually curious. I was 16 and my dad was coming back and forth, and I started to have flashbacks. I didn't even know what a flashback was. As far as I knew, my life was about swimming pools and Barbie dolls, and I had no recollection of the past. So when he came back, and I also had my first boyfriend, I got triggered, and it all came out in a form of a dream, and it started coming in fragments and very, very fast, like incredibly fast. So I didn't know what was happening. I thought I was going crazy. And I didn't want to take a nap. In fact, I didn't want to take a nap. I didn't want to go to sleep because they kept on coming back. And it felt like a movie. It was just like little fragments, and they were broken up. And thank God I kept a journal, and I was able to write everything down and look back at what was going on. But it lasted probably for a good year. And it was so intense and so hard to go through. I didn't ask anybody I didn't know where to turn to. I just thought I was losing my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, I thought of committing suicide. And that entire year, I would sit outside my bedroom window and contemplate, sometimes daily, and contemplate about jumping, the pros and the cons, look at my journal, try to find any information. The
So no
information,
therapy at this point.
no,
Okay.
none at all. But I did look in the public library. You'd have to go to, so we lived in Torremolinos. You'd have to go to Malaga, which was it was a big ride out there, and I was just a kid. So I'd have to go out there, go to the public library there, and then find an English section. And the therapy books there were more therapeutic, and I didn't understand the language. I didn't understand what was happening to me. So I thought, gosh, I got to save myself when I tried to figure out that I was worth living for. And I tried to figure out what I was going to do. And I just started thinking about things that would help me. And journaling was one of them. Mantras, inspirational quotes. I would stick in my bathroom mirror, looking at everything because I didn't feel anything. I couldn't hear anything. Nothing tasted, or I didn't even see the color blue, like really the color blue. So I would just try to exercise every day, just go out and go, okay, the sky is blue, like it's blue, and walk in the water.
Like grounding yourself.
Like trying to ground myself.
Let me just interrupt you for a second. So, and I don't want this to be as naive as it sounds, but what was inhibiting you from reaching out to your mother or your closest friend?
I think it's because,
or anyone.
Yeah, I think it was basically fear of sounding crazy. I wasn't trusting, basically because my father broke my trust levels. So I wasn't trusting I tried to tell my mother, and it's this long history where I tried to tell her. We went to the shelter, and even back then shelters didn't exist, but we went to the shelter. I had been examined, but since my hymen was intact, then I wasn't considered sexually abused. So it was just considered fondling. Oh, wow. And I didn't have any broken bones. I didn't have bruises. So I got placed back into the house. So I really had all my boundaries, betrayal issues, incredible betrayal issues. So I just didn't reach out to them. That wasn't even a choice. And my sister, who I'm very close to, out of protection, would tattletale on me. So I didn't trust her either. And I understood that was a protection thing for her too.
So how does this unfold? At what point are you like, okay, I need to get professional help, or did you?
I did. So it didn't really unfold until I had, so let's see here. Let me just think if I get the timeline right. I think I was a young adult and I started getting professional help, and it wasn't about sexual abuse. It was more about, I got married young. So it was more marriage counseling, and then my son was born, and then it was about grief and loss. And from there, I decided to share, my history of sexual abuse and physical abuse. And that was kind of interesting too. I've had a lifetime of therapeutic help in many different ways, but I found that she was amazing at grief and loss. But once I told her about my attempted suicide, I felt like I was on suicide watch. And at that point where she was constantly checking on me, which was fine. I understand that's her role, but I just felt that as a therapist, she didn't resonate with me. So I found somebody else, and I just started going on this journey of trying to find different therapeutic help. And I realized too, that therapists are people, they have bad days, good days, they have children, bills, whatnot. So I kind of stuck to people who specialized. So I would go through one form of therapy, like, let's see here, trauma. And I felt that like a trauma therapist really worked on what I was trying to get at. And there was no delays. And I was eager to do the therapy, to do the work. And if it didn't resonate after a while, usually I would just ask and go, hey, this is not working for me anymore. Can you refer me to somebody else? And they were always very helpful. I had one therapist also tell me, this is my time. This is your time. This is your money. So if you're not doing the work, inside and outside, you know, you're wasting your time. And that kind of resonated with me. And I thought, ooh, okay, this makes sense. And I was also, because I had a child with special needs, he had his first surgery cost close to $1 million. And I was middle income. And when your first bill comes out and it's close to $1 million, and he's 29 years ago, that was astronomical. So I ended up losing my home. I couldn't pay my medical bills, and I became homeless afterwards, and then a single mom. So that created a whole other form of trauma. So I had to find therapy that was based on a sliding scale. So that $25, that $50 really meant something to me. So I was really eager to get the results that I wanted to find.
At what point, Cindy, did things begin to click? Did you feel treatment was working? Were you making progress? Were you working through the trauma?
At what point? I would have to say probably more in my 30s or close to 40s. I think I was trying to find resolution, and I realized that there is no magic bullet. Like, you have to do the work. And I just started to become more particular about who I asked for help. And like EDMR, like, I'm like, oh, this is not working for me. Let's just go on to something else. You know, just started being really direct.
Was there a particular modality that did work for you or resonate with you?
I really, constellation, I have to say, constellation therapy. It was just the fact that I got to experience like a new father, a new mother, and then have a end result, the one that I was searching for. I found that to be incredibly powerful. It felt like boot camp, like mental boot camp. I don't know if it's for everybody, but it was kind of like hitting my head against a wall, and I needed that. That was great. And then later on, I think EDMR was great. I got a lot of success out of that.
So you mentioned depression before. I mean, prior to finding a therapist that helped you, what symptoms were you experiencing? Were you depressed? Were you anxious, or what was going on?
Fatigue. I was really tired, just fatigue. Well, first of all, I didn't want to sleep because I didn't want to have any more memories coming through. I couldn't taste. I just felt like I didn't sense anything. I'm also, you know, being a teenager, I think my parents were just trying to just live their life too. And I don't think that they just probably chalked it up as a moody therapist, you know, moody teenager. I also did confront my dad at 16 when I started having these repressed memories. And
so, excuse me, so was he the abuser?
Yes. Oh, I'm so
Okay.
sorry. Yes,
Yeah.
my dad was the abuser. So I did confront him. I found that to be very powerful, but very defeating, because a criminal doesn't usually say, hey, yeah, I did it. So that was really hard. And I started to realize that I was the only one that I could find probably the help that I could get until I got back to the States.
So talk about the book, the genesis of the book. How did this come about? Why did you write the book?
Well, actually, it started like a cookbook for me, which sounds weird, but I think I've had so much trauma in my life. I was taking my recipes. I love to cook and be creative. I was taking my recipes down and I was flipping them over because they're all dated. And I flipped over one and it said Mrs. Anderson's grilled cheese sandwich. And I looked at it, I thought, what? So I turned it over and I said, oh, age 5. I know what happened at age 5. And so whatever that memory, I took a spiral notebook, wrote that memory down. And at the end of all the recipes, it basically took me an entire day to do. I noticed that I had 5 spiral notebooks, and one was on sexual abuse. The other one was emotional trauma from raising a child with special needs, being homeless, that type of thing. I had inspirational quotes, what are the things that got me through. And when I was rubbing my hands on them, I thought, gosh, you know, the one on sexual abuse just had a lot of shame that I was still carrying. And I didn't realize like how, like the levels of that, like the roots of that just are so deep and so compounded. No matter how much therapy you have, it still kind of hangs out in your closet in some weird way. And I just thought, I don't really talk about this. And I thought I couldn't have gone through all this trauma without having any value to it. So that's part of the reason why I did that. And I thought, this is the book this is the book I should have found. Because I found everything to be therapeutic, or if I read anything that was helpful, it was also just about their trauma. And then that was more damaging in a sense. I was more traumatized. So I just wanted to find something that had what happened to them, how they went through it, what they did, what worked for them. Maybe I could have taken one thing or two things out of it, or just thrown it away and go, okay, like, all right, so be it. But
Right.
I also needed to know that somebody got through. I just needed hope. I think that was a largest part of it, just hope.
And talk more about how that was hard to find in your journey.
Um, well, also being so isolated, living in a different country, people don't talk about, again, people
Mhm.
don't talk about sex. I mean, we just don't. I don't know. I love to watch people squirm in their seats when I tell them about my history. And it's not like I love to, but I could see that it makes them incredibly uncomfortable. But I think, like, gosh, that's even just more reason to say
Right.
that. And people always said, well, you don't look like a person who's been abused. And that always amuses me. I'm like, well, what does a predator look like? What does somebody abused look like? And I thought, just people do not talk about this.
Mhm.
So um, I don't know. It's just been a long journey, just this crazy, crazy long journey. And um, if I think back, it was really tools that we all have inside of ourselves, like journaling, meditation, mantras, self-care. Um, Now we have the internet, listening to podcasts like this. I think we all have like a knowing of who to turn to or where to
Right.
go. Um, I've learned too that a lot of times, and I could recognize this too. I've learned a lot of times people, once they have a child, they go through the flashbacks,
Mhm.
or it's some form of trigger. And I thought that was really fascinating too. I heard of people, like they just recognized they were abused. And the numbers are staggering. I mean, 1 out of 4 girls, 1 out of 6 boys, and that's almost
Right.
epidemic.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I started this podcast. So when I was working at a clinic, uh, we were assessing and treating young individuals who were showing early signs of psychosis. And one of our jobs was to take referral calls from parents and teachers and therapists, and uh, through a series of questions, find out if their child or client, whatever, was appropriate for the program. And 99.9% of the times, there was trauma involved that
Mhm.
had gone unrecognized by the therapist and by the teacher and by the parent. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? So we need to talk about this. But let me ask you this question here. You said things happen between 5 and 10.
Right.
That's a huge amount of time.
Mhm.
I mean, I can't imagine. That's 5 friggin' years that this
Mhm.
goes on. How are you doing now? I mean, it's gotta. Come on. I'm a male talking to you as a female doing this, but I can only imagine it's just one step at a time,
It is.
one moment at a time.
It is truly one step at a time. I think it's, I don't know. I always wonder what the numbers are with COVID, parents living with their children. Not that everybody's a predator, but if the numbers are 1 out of 4, it's just staggering to think about that and the proximity. And I'm curious to see what that's like. But um, I think it's crazy when you're a child, it's different when you're an adult. When you're a child and you're living with your monster, you're living with that person. I think children innately try to find ways to protect themselves.
Mhm.
I used to pretend that my father never existed, and I didn't even, I didn't like him as a person, or I just didn't like him as a person. So I never engaged with him. I would actually pretend that he wasn't in the room. I would just walk past him. All these different defenses
Mhm.
that I would say the words, I am the wallpaper, I am the wallpaper, just trying to disappear or
Oh.
walk silently past him. Um, I have to say, sometimes I look back and go, I can't even believe I went through that. But I think we're resilient. Humans are resilient. And if you really
Mhm.
want to find health from your past or trauma, I think you will. I really do believe that.
Um, who's your book for?
It's for young teenagers, it's for adults, it's for people who want to be educated. Um, it's for anybody, I think. I think so.
So, talking with Cindy Benezra, the book is called Under the Orange Blossoms. So, a lot of therapists listen to this, a lot of survivors listen to this, a lot of people who kind of identify into both of those headings listen to this. If they're to those people, to that person listening to this who maybe is going through trauma right now, what would you say to them?
Well, I know there's 1-800 numbers out there. And I think that's probably a good place to start right there and look at local resources from there. Unfortunately, there's not enough, but I would start with
Mhm.
1-800 numbers. Yeah.
Right now, as you sit here, as you're living your life, what are some of the challenges for you as you go through this, having written the book and so forth?
Uh, I find it disturbing that people say, well, I don't know anybody like that, or I've never heard of that. That doesn't happen. Um, I find it disturbing. I find it really naive. Um, Maybe they want to believe that. So that's one. Another challenge is people don't want to hear it. The
They don't,
resistant
right?
to it. They're just very resistant to hearing that this happens all the time. I find it interesting that more men have shared their story with me. Um, I'm an event planner, and more men have shared their story with me and said, "Hey, Cindy, I listened to you. I saw your YouTube video or whatever it may be. I saw you on Facebook or something. And I really like what you're doing. This happened to me." And then they'll
Mm.
tell me their story, and it's with a cocktail in our hands. And I'm like, okay. But I always find it's some scenario like that. And men said that this has happened to me. It still affects my life. It still affects my sexuality. I find that it just blows me away how often that happens. And I mean, a lot. And women usually share online. So it's definitely different ways of communicating. And
Mhm.
I've asked men, like, why don't you share that? And they're like, well, I'm a man. I could never do that publicly.
Right.
But with you, it's differently. And so I just thought, gosh, there's just some really big gaps. Or I've talked to some young teenagers and say, I can't share because the system's broken. They would take their father or their mother or whomever it may be out of the household, and it's a two working income
Mhm.
family, then they wouldn't have the means. And so they self-sacrifice themselves. And I hear that one too. And it just breaks my heart.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's definitely a broken system.
Hope seems to be a big and important message that you want to bring to this. The hope of healing, the hope of moving, being able to move through this. Um, Talk more about that.
I think hope is what makes us thrive. It makes you thrive to be something more than you are at this moment. It makes you want to be more. And we all want to be more. We all want to grow. We all want to prosper emotionally, physically, yes, and financially. But growth is a huge thing. And hope is that. Hope is just knowing that there's a brighter future, that there's light at the end of the tunnel. If they did it, I could do it. There's something to that. And I think that's for any age. I mean, even a 2-year-old looks at that and go, oh, they did it, I'm going to do it too. It's just being human.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the best way for people to reach you? If they want to reach out?
www.cindytalks.com.
Okay. And in terms of the book, people can get that. Is that available anywhere right now?
Anywhere, yeah. It's available anywhere on Amazon, any formats, places that you buy your
Once
books.
again, Under the Orange Blossoms. And how about other books that maybe recently you've been reading that have inspired you, or in the past, and whether they're trauma related or not? What would you say? What would you share?
Well, I have to say, okay, I've brought it here. It is a healing sexual trauma workbook. I have to say, this is what I didn't like as a kid.
What you didn't like? Okay.
But I do like them. This one, I noticed it's from Erica Shershun. And I picked it up. I didn't like them because workbooks are so big and so daunting. You're thinking like, oh my gosh, if I don't read that book, am I not cured? And this one was short, concise. It was easy to read. It had practical tools that I really liked it. And I have a tendency to look through that because sometimes a young boy or young girl will come up to me and they'll ask me something. I'm like, wait a minute. I think this is just really nice and concise.
Awesome. We'll have that linked up here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Cindy, look, thank you so much for coming on here, for sharing your story. And it is hard to talk about. I mean, I've been doing this for a zillion episodes, and it's not easy to talk about because there's some, you know what it is for me? It's like you're almost acknowledging that this awfulness exists in the world, and that's a part of it. Right. It's like, gee, man. But it's inspiring what you're doing and what you've done, and to hear you talk and to stand here and bring hope to the world. We need it. God knows we need it.
We do. Thank you. That's really sweet of you to say that. Thanks.
All right. Take care.
Okay. You too.
All right.
Bye.